Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis. This is episode 129, recording on Tuesday, November 18th. Your Vikings are 4-6. They lost to the Bears on Sunday, and we're going to do a mailbag today where you guys toss some questions to me over on social media, and I'm going to get to them as best I can with as much information, intel, film study, advanced metrics as I can provide, as we tend to do early in the weeks. If you're new here and watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below. There's a little red box in the corner. Really appreciate you guys doing that. It's free for you. It helps us out. And then if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or iHeart or wherever you get your podcast, you can rate or review and all that stuff. Follow us. All that stuff helps us out. So thank you for doing that. This show, which we do 2 times a week every week, and I cover the Vikings day-to-day for The Athletic, which is why I'm in the TCO Performance Center right now. This show is presented by First Resource Bank. It is a member FDIC bank in the Minneapolis area, run by some very disappointed, upset Vikings fans and Tim Siegley, Aaron Siegley, and Charlie Anderson, who are they're texting me these days with questions about, trying to ensure I maintain their hope. Hopefully I do that as best I can. Wink, wink, Charlie. But it's tough right now. There's no question. Please go check out First Resource Bank. Their information is in the description. And then the show is also sponsored by Unreal, locally owned and operated clothing brand that is phenomenal. It really is. A lot of the players wear it. You see Josh Metellus, TJ Hawkinson with it all the time. And they've got these limited edition Vikings hoodie drops, who my friends are they're begging me for, and we're going to have to start some bidding or something like that. But please go check out Unreal. It's great stuff. Not going to waste any time with a ramble to begin. I'm just going to get right into the questions. And again, these are going to consist of JJ McCarthy, anything from that to Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's drafting, to the defense, to the special teams. I mean, we're going to run the gamut here. You guys asked a ton of good questions, and I'm grateful for it. We're going to start here with Rock NHL. Rock asks, was JJ playing like this in camp? ? Most of the reports this summer seem genuinely positive. So I'm not going to try to play revisionist history guy here with any of this. What I will say is, fortunately, all of the podcasts that I've done and stories that I've written from being out here every day in training camp, all that is in the files, in the archives, and you can go find that stuff, hopefully, to verify the comments that I make now in the response to this question. But the word that I used probably 20 times, both in podcast form and in writing throughout training camp, to describe JJ's play at that time was uneven. I mean, there were some throws, specifically some intermediate types of throws to Jordan Addison, where you're like, that was nice. But then there were a lot of throws during camp. There were some deep throws at Aaron Jones that I can recall, but there were a lot of throws in camp where misses toward the sideline. I mean, there were some out-of-the-pocket plays where I can just recall, Kevin O'Connell talking about them afterwards and being teaching moments. And there were in the red zone plays where I remember going back on social media and watching film of the plays, and behind you could see Josh McCown and Kevin O'Connell with their hands on their heads over some of the passes into traffic and that type of thing. So, I just say I felt in the moment like it was very, very, very inconsistent. And the offense in general was struggling mightily. And it was tough at the time in training camp to parse how much of this is the quarterback, how much of this is not having Justin Jefferson, how much of this is Brian Flores' defense and what they're throwing at guys, how much of it is it's just training camp and this is how it goes, kind of like in baseball, it's like the hitters are always ahead of the pitchers, something like that. Like you're all at the time. I say you guys asked me a lot of these questions, and it was hard for me to really be aggressive in taking stances one way or another. I mean, the other aspect that made it difficult to evaluate JJ in particular was the other quarterbacks that he was alongside I mean, specifically with the first team and second team were Sam Howell, who, I mean, he might have thrown 7 interceptions in camp. Judd Zolgad probably tracked those numbers. I couldn't do it for my eyes' sake. But I mean, Sam Howell on a day-to-day basis had so much trouble, and JJ McCarthy, it did not fall to that level. So he was definitely better than Sam Howell, but that bar, it was hard to know where that bar really stood. And then Brett Rippon, who was one of the other quarterbacks that would kind of mix in a little bit with the second team, third team, what have you. Brett had some really down days too. There was a couple more solid days, but I mean, that was the benchmark. Like I've wondered often in the alternate universe where Daniel Jones doesn't sign with Indianapolis and he's here, what would JJ have looked like alongside, paired against Daniel Jones every day? It would be kind of an interesting dynamic to have been evaluating that in real time. But I mean, there are some vivid memories in my head. I mean, there was a day really late in camp. Like this was after joint practices, and there were no fans out there. The Vikings had already taken down a lot of the stands that they put up for training camp. And I remember, for some reason, vividly, Chad Greenway and his family were out there, and the Vikings were on the field closest to the facility and standing out there, and you're watching, and it was rough. I mean, there were a lot of misses that day. And I mean, I didn't ask Chad if I could share this, but I remember, because I was thinking like, man, this is rough. I remember Chad that day approached me. He's like, is this how it's looked? And throughout really most of camp, and it had not been that. I think the downs existed that much, but to say that they did not exist would be totally overlooking kind of, the truth. And the offensive struggles were evident to everybody. I mean, there was the day, and I've mentioned this plenty of times, and it will exist. We'll be talking about it probably for a while, where the offense was struggling. Kevin O'Connell had a press conference, and someone asked him about it, and he looked up the sky, and he said the sky's not falling. I mean, for him to do that in that point, for me, it was a pretty clear reflection of like, it's not good. But the sky might not be falling, but it was not fluid. I mean, I don't know how much from the side watching you could see where you're like, man, he's playing slow or he's playing fast or the decisions are sketchy. I mean, that stuff is really hard to see. But from a sheer throwing perspective, it by no means was it this dialed in, crisp thing. I'll say the joint practices, the Wednesday was pretty meh against the Patriots. And then Thursday, he was exceptional. It was his best day of practice by far, but you peel the layers back on that, and I mean, you hear some stuff like, there was some pretty serious game planning to be done for that Thursday of joint practices. So how much of that success was, natural versus created? I mean, again, revisionist speaking now, it's easy to look back and paint that particular picture. But I mean, and I'll end with this initial question, which is a good one. I've spent the last week maybe, and this is not normal, and my parents and our marketing director and everybody who cares probably for my mental well-being is probably going to be cringing at hearing me say this. But I spent the last week going back and watching some Michigan film because, I mean, I like watching film. B, I'm just trying to parse like how much were some of these misses just totally crazy departures from what existed in college. And I got to tell you, like, and you can pull it up for yourself. If you go back and rewatch the Michigan-Purdue game from 2023, there are close to a handful of throws in that game where you're like, wow, that is a jarring miss. Like, it just that exists in that game. You again pull up the game. If you can get the film, pull up the film, and you'll see misses in that game. a lot of the same mechanical overstriding, whipping his right leg around to throws to the left. I mean, that stuff exists. And then I haven't watched the full Rutgers film, but early on there was a throw to the left sideline where it reminded me vividly, I mean, like spit image, same miss as JJ trying to hit Jordan Addison down the left sideline against the Ravens. So to peel it even further back, like I would just say that, in looking for it, like you saw some of them. I mean, there was a throw in the Iowa game, might have been the Big Ten championship, where it's Colston Loveland on like a throw to the right side, and JJ just sails him by a couple feet. And it hard to understand. So that's where my mind goes with that question, Rock, and it's a good one. Next question comes from Drath. Drath asked, Alex Drath, at Drath DMR, do you know if the Vikings have a biomechanics expert on staff working with McCarthy on his mechanics, similar to what Josh Allen did with Chris Hess after his rookie year? So I'll peel the layers back a little bit on this. And this is a nerd, it's a fascination for me. So I covered Major League Baseball for 3 years. Towards the end of my time covering baseball, 2021, 2022, biomechanics had started to take off, like biomechanical analysis. So these quarterbacks would go to these laboratories and essentially, with motion capture technology, teams would get a feel for like specific aspects of their throwing motions, and then the teams would then use that information, deploy it from a strength and conditioning perspective to kind of and weighted balls to start to alter these pitchers and throwers' motions. And it's something that's really taken off with baseball. The Royals were like 10 years behind naturally, as they always were. They were operating with the 3G when the league was on an iPhone 10 anyway. But yeah, it had started to take off. And then Alex Drath here mentions a guy, Chris Hess, who created this company a few years ago in the football space called Biometric. And he purchased a bunch of really expensive motion capture cameras. And he worked with a couple guys in the private throwing industry. Jordan Palmer's used it, Will Hewlett, a bunch of these guys. Again, I've done a lot of work in this area. And Chris Hess worked a lot with a couple guys. He worked with Sam Darnold a lot. He's worked with Josh Allen. Josh Allen did a pretty aggressive mechanical rewiring after his rookie season, and he attributes a lot of it to some of what he gleaned from Chris Hess's analysis. Now, I'll say Chris Hess last year, when Sam Darnold was the quarterback, he would come to the Vikings facility and motion capture Sam maybe like 5 or 6 times during the season. I don't remember. Like I saw Chris out on the practice field after practice, and he would be motion capturing Sam. And it was awesome for me to catch up with a guy in Chris who I've talked to a lot. To the question, Alex, do the Vikings have a biomechanics expert on staff working with McCarthy on his mechanics? I definitively don't have a direct answer to that question. I'd be lying if I said I did. The Vikings have a sports science staffer, a guy named Dan Ridenour, who worked at Nebraska with their athletic performance lab, who would have an understanding, a pretty definitive understanding of some of the biomechanics stuff that was going on in baseball. I also know that the Vikings performance staff, Tyler Williams, Dan Ridenour, they have met with a couple people in the throwing space, and they did, like a year and a half ago, and a guy, Tom Gormley, who does a lot of mechanics work. So I know they have an understanding of this space. I have not seen Chris Hess here at the facility one time this year. It is my understanding that JJ has not utilized that type of technology on a consistent basis. But I will say that is really something that, to have a real rewiring, it really has to happen in the off season. And like the caveat is there's no guarantees with any of that. I mean, you're often not seeing a lot of tweaks to throwing motions because, I mean, this is maybe a very simplistic way to describe it, but it's like a golfer. Like if you're pretty good, to change your entire grip or your entire swing, like you're risking never getting back to the place at which you were. I mean, it's like you're taking a big leap. And so it'll be interesting. And again, like Alex, you might ask, well, why was Chris coming to watch Sam and motion capture Sam last year? A lot of that was just tweaks and like evaluation to make sure that Sam's mechanics had not spiraled kind of through the season and with some of the injuries that he was dealing with. And even that is valuable, obviously. So yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting this offseason to see how much JJ is diving into this stuff, how much they're forthcoming with it, if the Vikings, coaching staff and stuff is okay with it. I mean, I thought it was interesting today. Wes Phillips was asked about some of JJ's adjustments and how much you can do what they're trying to get done with him in the season. And Wes Phillips was pretty clear. Like, we're not trying to change his throwing motion. It's just, can his footwork and fundamentals be consistent? So yeah, that's a long-winded way to answer that question. And if you have questions about that, if you guys are listening to this, like I don't fully understand what is motion capture, I've got links and stuff that I can send you and can talk in further detail about it in future episodes, because it's something as someone, like, I always want to be on the forefront of a lot of the player development stuff. It's something I love. And so done a lot of work on it. Next question comes from Olu. Olu asks, where is the accountability for the O-line coach? The dialogue last year was how we needed improvement. Ed and Garrett Bradbury are playing tremendous for their current team. Is it coaching? First of all, like, I have not watched the tape of Ed Ingram or Garrett Bradbury to verify the narrative that I've seen plenty of times on social media that those guys are playing amazing. First of all, I mean, I didn't even look this up, but I'm going to do it right now. Like, how many snaps has Ed Ingram played? That's something I would ask. 476. Okay, so 99% of the snaps. I mean, I'd have to go watch the film. Maybe I will if I'm that much of a sicko to evaluate these guys. But it does feel like a very convenient narrative. And I'm not here to, say that Chris Cooper, the Vikings O-line coach, is Dante Scarnecchia or, whoever else you want to praise as the elite of the elite, the Jeff Stoutlands of the world in the NFL. I'm really not. And like criticism of position coaches, it's at some point, like, performance and production just is what it is. But I would tell you, if you pull up the film of the last 2 weeks, specifically the Bears game, and the caveat here would be that the Bears have one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL. But if you just pull up that film, like I did it, and I took some screenshots of what the pockets looked like, I mean, it's as close to routes on air as you're going to get in an NFL game. And that's one of the most wild aspects of JJ's inaccuracies in that game was it is not as if he was under siege. And so, like, in my mind, I'm thinking during the course of the game and after, like, what if it was Michael Parsons bearing down his neck every snap? Then what would it have looked like? I mean, that was a thought. It was and is a thought that remains in my mind. So I just, like, early in the season, a lot of the pockets were probably, a lot of them were byproduct of Justin School looking like a turnstile on the left side. All due respect, but that's how it looked like. And I like, there was the stretch against Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Darisaw's in and out, a million Joe Huber's in, Walter Rouse is in. It's really hard to evaluate O-line play when you don't have the starting level group. I mean, the drop off is massive, and it's a conversation of, been asked a lot, like, why do you think defenses feel like they're they've gained ground on the evolution of offense? I mean, some of the answer to me feels like it could just be O-line play is really hard to find, and the drop off between starters and backups is immense. But that's how I'll answer that question. It's probably not going to suffice for someone wanting me to call for Chris Cooper or whatever, but I just think sometimes it's just not that simplistic. At Big Sexy J Westy, it's a great handle. I mean, wow, Big Sexy A Lewis, probably not going to work. How do the Vikings draft JJ at 11, knowing how bad his mechanics are, which is leading to inaccuracy, and then double down by not having a contingency plan with a viable veteran until JJ can figure it out? How did they not see how unready he was regardless of his injury? Whew. That's going to take, that's a deep breath is required. I mean, look, the Vikings drafted JJ at 10, so we'll start there. There were a lot of ranging opinions on JJ in the draft. You guys know this. I mean, there were so many different subsets of people. Like, I remember having vivid conversations with it, just having real conversations with an AFC executive I trust who was like, who did not see the first round evaluation. Greg Cosell, a media member who studied this stuff for a long time, was pretty open and honest that he viewed JJ as a developmental prospect. Nate Tice, who's been on this podcast, kind of viewed it the same way. And then on the flip side, I believe Dane Brugler, who does evaluations for us at The Athletic, I mean, mentioned a lot of the traits that we've talked about time and time again, and said that he could kind of understand it. So as far as the draft position, I mean, and you guys know that the quarterback position comes with helium. I mean, that's just how it goes. Like when you're a quarterback in the draft, with how much this position is coveted for reasons that we all understand, guys are going to just, I mean, rise. That's just, you know, there is what's the word I'm looking for? There's like an interest that just is part of it when you're drafting a quarterback. I'd say as far as the mechanics, the Vikings knew definitively that the overstriding stuff was something that was going to have to be worked on. And you guys might be listening and ask, Alec, what are you talking about with overstriding? Just think about it like this. You know how when you're like a little kid, you're throwing the baseball and it's like you want your feet to be shoulder width apart. Well, JJ oftentimes, his left foot when he threw the ball in college was way outside his left shoulder. And what that can do is can cause you to over-rotate, can cause you to cut the ball. I mean, there's a lot of there is a lot of issues accuracy-wise that can occur when you do that. So like it was something. I remember having conversations where it's like, you know, he puts a lot of torque on his arm. That's something we're going to have to watch. So that stuff, it's not like this is all just, I mean, talking about the layering and the touch, that's been a focus from the outset. The question with that stuff is how much can that be improved? And especially in game versus, I mean, it's like we talked so many times about this, but you know, practice is like the driving range. And JJ didn't get a year of the driving range of scout team, so he was really thrown directly onto the course. That's kind of how it is. And then I'd say to the question of, you know, how do they not have contingency with a viable veteran? Well, the Vikings wanted Daniel Jones to be back here, and they believed that to be requisite insurance. I've said it many times. They were willing to pay as much, if not more, than Indianapolis was for Daniel Jones' services. Once Daniel Jones chose the Colts opportunity, that's when things got haywire, you know, and that's when the Rodgers conversation surfaced, and we don't need to relitigate that now. You know, that's where, you know, you had certain players. It was your Joe Flacco's. The Vikings ultimately settled on Sam Howell, and then after seeing what Sam Howell did or did not do specifically in training camp, then they found their way to Carson Wentz. But once the Daniel Jones option went out the door, the degree of insurance, it just took a major hit. I mean, it's just like the options were not spectacular. Like Joe Flacco, how much better is Joe Flacco than of an option than Carson Wentz? I mean, maybe like some of you would be screaming and be like, it's so much better, but the Bengals are still, they're still the Bengals. And so I'd say, and that was really, I've said it many times. I mean, with the way last season ended and Sam Darnold's last two games, and the emotion of that, and paired with the fact that the Vikings needed cap space because they haven't draft cap space to fill holes that they haven't been able to fill through the draft. Moving off from Sam Darnold, while what he's done this year has been very impressive, and I love covering Sam, and I do not take for granted his ability to play quarterback and his journey at all. Like that was something that made sense at the time. What did not make sense was that the backup quarterback situation was what it was. And that's why, I remember going on the radio and that was the question, what are they going to do with backup? And then you get many people who are like, if you're talking about the backup, it doesn't even matter. But in an instance where there were a lot of questions about where the quarterback was at in his development, and there were a lot of questions from people internally about that, which is why the Aaron Rodgers conversation existed in the first place. The fact that that better insurance was not acquired, and it was Sam Howell. I mean, that's something that it's a worthwhile question. The next question comes from J Dose Z. You have a second overall pick in the sub-chain draft. The generational talent, Jersey Mike's goes off at the board at 1-1. Who are you drafting with your pick? You're right. Jersey Mike's would be off the board. It's just how it goes. My evaluation would lead me to Potbelly, and I'd probably go with the OG Rec. That would be the number 2 overall pick for me. In the sub draft. Trey Andrew asks, who can I send my alcohol to in the organization? I laughed when I saw that message, and it's good, but you're not the only one. I've got buddies who were potentially in Destin drinking Yinglings on Sunday. Thai Soup asks, play the blame game, holds on kickoff returns. I mean, look, a lot of people want to blame or talk about special teams or blame special teams, and they are top 10 in almost every meaningful metric, DVOA, EPA, and a lot of that obviously is tied to Will Riker's performance as a kicker, but I've made this joke. Like, for me right now, blaming special teams is like getting mad that your window won't roll down of your car when your car doesn't have an engine. Like it's just not, I mean, look, and so that's what I'd say just broadly. If you're asking me about the holds on special teams, a lot of people will obviously want to point the finger at Matt Daniels, but he is the Vikings special teams coordinator right now, is working with a group of a lot of young players, and many of them in instances like Ivan Pace Jr., who was off on the kickoff return, like that was his responsibility. He's the player who has not been trusted to play more defensive snaps, so he's thrown to Matt Daniels on the special teams unit. And a lot of those guys are undrafted players. Some of them haven't played special teams before. And I'm of the opinion, it doesn't excuse the holds, but I'm of the opinion that when you're working with this personnel in that phase, it's just to be expected. That's just how I feel about it. And I'm sure I'll take, people will be, you're vouching for Matt Daniels, or you're making excuses for Matt Daniels, but but for CJ Ham and Eric Wilson, essentially, it's a unit that hasn't played a lot together. It's a really young unit. A lot of them haven't played NFL ball. I mean, you got undrafted guys, Chaz Chambliss, Tyler Batty, Austin Keys. It's a lot of undrafted players on that phase. And guys go undrafted for a reason. So, yeah. Next question comes from Curtis Nelson with the lack of turnovers created this season compared to last season, how much of it is related to Cam Bynum not being in the secondary anymore, as I feel he was a ball hawk? If not, what is the reason? I felt like this defense, this team has missed Cam Bynum's energy. I've really felt like that for a while. And not just, just a really smart player. So that's something that I definitely think it's apt for you to mention, Curtis. But the lack of turnovers on the back end, some of it for me can just be chalked up to luck. There have been tip passes that have not fallen in the Vikings defense's hands the way they probably have in years past. Some of it for me can be chalked up to not being in as advantageous spots, be it from a, down and distance perspective. You get run on early downs. Offenses don't have to take as much risk on third down. So that's probably part of it. It feels to me a little bit like the secondary is lacking. Like, I know Isaiah Rodgers is fast, but in terms of flying downhill, there just doesn't feel like there's a ton of real disruptive speed back there. So that's for me part of it. And then one of the aspects that just can't be overlooked to me is the level of quarterback play that they're facing is not what it's been over the last bunch of years. Like Jake Browning was, and that's why there were 5 turnovers that game. But Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, an improved Caleb Williams, this weekend, Jordan Love, these guys don't turn the ball over a ton. And so, whereas in years past, it's the Justin Fields of the world. It's, you could go through a lot of the young quarterbacks they've played over time who are just overmatched against this defense. So that's a part of it too that I feel like is worth mentioning. All right, next question from Jack Rackham at MN Sports and Poly. What overall grade would you give the defense this season? While they haven't been excellent by any stretch, they certainly seem like they're good enough to win ball games. If you're asking me about a letter grade, I'd probably say B+. Maybe that's rosy, but I feel like they've given this team a chance at competing in close to every game. If the offense was competent, the Vikings would probably be around 7-3. The run defense slipped for a bit. The Kenneth Gainwell game, the Quinshon Judkins game. But the Vikings have responded in that area and really fortified that aspect of the defense. And yes, the lack of turnovers haven't been there, but they've given they gave the Vikings a chance Sunday at winning a game that they had no business winning. And so I don't know if it's like a Super Bowl caliber defense, but definitely think it's enough to be really competitive, even at that time of year. Whereas the offense is not remotely close to that. Next question comes from at Pie in a Can. That's funny. Dallas Turner looked good on Sunday. Do you think he gets an expanded role coming up, even if Grenard returns this week? I don't mean to be like a buzzkill, but Dallas Turner's numbers were really good. Believe he had 7 pressures and a sack and a tip pass. But for me, if you look at the film and just watch it snap in, snap out. Yes, he long-armed his way into the backfield probably close to a handful of times, but it was against the left tackle, Theo Benedette, who for me, it was an undrafted player in 2024. For me, he's a backup tackle. And so, and then there were times too where Dallas Turner's beating a tight end, which he should. And it was Durham Smythe and it was Cole Kmet, who at times really stood Dallas Turner up. So I'm not sure. For me, it's a good reminder of you see a lot of these numbers and they pop, but the real data point has to be the tape, because the numbers just, and I love pressures and I love pressure rate, but they're not all created equal. and the level of opponent, the speed at which they're applying that pressure, that stuff is not often taken into account. So do I expect Dallas's role to expand if Jonathan Grenard comes back? Not really, no. Like you really need Jonathan Grenard's juice in there. His ability to apply quick pressures is proven against elite tackles. So you really got to hope he's back against this Packers front and offensive line that is not as good as it's probably been. But if it's Dallas Turner going against Rasheed Walker, I mean, it's going to be a tough matchup. It just is. That's again, not trying to go too aggressive or be negative or anything, but I just don't think you can get carried away by the numbers when you watch the tape and think about it all. And we'll end with this question from Nick Miller because it'll probably be a long answer, but both head coach and GM got extensions for this offseason and got extensions this offseason, spent all the Wilfs cash, not all of it, with little to show for it. Should ownership and fans trust this current regime to course correct, and who is to blame for this mess? Wow. That is aggressive, that is harsh, and that is going to need to be unpacked. We'll start with the course correct part of it. Like, I still don't think we have seen enough data of J.J. McCarthy to understand or be able to fully lay out what the course correction is going to have to look like. Like, you just got to see the next 7 games, if he can stay healthy for the next 7 games, and assess if, to use Kevin O'Connell's parlance, the cement can dry on the foundation that they've tried to lay, specifically with his mechanics. If you get through 7 games and the inaccuracies are still very present, then, I mean, the course correction leads to questions. Is it with a 6 months or whatever of drilling the footwork every day? Does that, will that carry over into games? I'd have a hard time probably believing that. Is it going to, if the inaccuracies exist for the next 7 games, is that going to call for an entire rewiring of his mechanics? And is that possible in 7 months? And would that get, if that were to happen, would that allow you to be confident going into next season? I mean, that's an entirely different conversation. And then the other course correct avenues that, hopefully we don't have to go down, but I mean, in the future, these could be questions of like, okay, you need better insurance alongside J.J. McCarthy. What quarterback makes sense? And I would say, like, would I have the confidence that this team could identify that type of player? Yes. Like I could. Do I think they have a magic pill and ability to get J.J. McCarthy to a place at which he is dialed in immediately? Like it's one of the interesting conversations that has existed is, they're trying to make it tough on J.J. McCarthy to put him in spots. Like, I'm of the opinion that could not be further than the truth. If there's a conversation to be had, maybe it's like the offense itself just, has to be pared down much more. But for what they're trying to get J.J. McCarthy to do, like, they have removed staple concepts from what they do in the passing game to try to make this work. A lot of the passes, it's really all outbreaking routes at like 7 yards, screen passes, and then wide open runnerways down the field. Like, that's really what the passing game has become. If you can't do those things, like I don't really know, if you're Kevin O'Connell and the staff, what you can design that just becomes a magic pill. So rambling a little bit, Nick, but that's where I'd go with that. And then who is to blame? Like, I think this is where, it's hard for me not to, everyone wants me to pinpoint probably one person with this question. And I just can't do that because you want to talk about the drafting, and it's 100% part of the reason why things are as difficult as they are right now. Well, coaches have major influence on the draft process, and they have the last couple of years. So I can't in good conscience do what probably a lot of you would want to scream about Kwesi when, like, while yes, the drafting falls on his shoulders, these decisions are being heavily influenced by others, including coaches. And then furthermore, it's easy to blame one quarterback who's young, but yet, this team was designed with the intent that it would be so good everywhere else that it would cushion Jaden McCarthy. And everywhere else, it has not been so good around him. And so, again, easy to want to pinpoint one person, but I just, part of, I guess, if you want to use the phrase mess, I'm not going to call it that because it, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I will, what have you. But I mean, it's you don't find yourself in this type of situation because of one person, because of one aspect. I mean, I've said this before, but the drafts in particular, when you aren't drafting young talent that you can extend, then you have to be buying in this free agency bargain bin that can really be beneficial. Like, it's like a thrift store. You can really find something that's awesome. You could also find some stuff that's like, there's a reason it was in the thrift store. And you guys, Vikings fans, have seen the positive and negative of that. And so, like, the Lions, what they've done is they've drafted so well. How are they spending their money? On the good players that they know really well, who are young and they can move money into the future. That is the optimal approach. And so, like, until and I've said this now for a long time, whether you want to pin it on one person or the collective, but the draft, until the drafting reaches a certain level, it's just going to be really freaking hard to build a championship caliber team. That's just the situation. And, that's everywhere around the quarterback. And then the quarterback in itself right now is the question that it is. So, yeah, that's a very roundabout way of getting at those two questions, but that's a lot of where my mind goes when they're asked. And it's probably, again, just like with the Matt Daniels thing, it's probably not going to appease people wanting me to just flame a particular person, but I don't even think that's the right approach. So I'm not after that. But anyway, yep, that'll do it for episode 100 on a somber note. I mean, Lord have mercy. That's not the most uplifting way to end. But look, I mean, these seasons, they're a grind. You stick with them. You do what you got to do. And yeah, this is episode 129. Thank you for being here. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening to Apple or Spotify, you can rate and review and follow. Support First Resource Bank, great local community bank who cares about the Vikings. And then Unreal, the clothing brand, really awesome to get a partner with them all season. They've got limited edition NFL drops that I highly, highly recommend. Enjoy the week, and we will talk to you very, very soon.